I never expected my life to split cleanly into a before and after, but it happened the night my son died. That was the night silence became a living thing in my house, thick, watchful, and impossible to ignore. Before that moment, I was simply Elaine Carter, a retired librarian, a widow who managed her days with practiced calm, and a mother who believed she still had time with her only child. Afterward, I became something else entirely, a woman trying to piece together the parts of her life that grief had shattered. Michael had been my world's brightest light. Even as a child, he carried an intensity that both fascinated and worried me. He was brilliant, fiercely loyal, and full of questions no adult could answer quite as quickly as he wanted. He grew into those questions, building a tech company that seemed to blossom overnight, turning him into the kind of man newspapers liked to photograph, confident, visionary, relentlessly focused. But to me, he was still the boy who used to fall asleep on the living room floor with books sprawled across his chest. Then last winter, his heart failed him. No warning, no explanation, just a phone call that shattered my world with 4 words. We did everything possible. As I learned to navigate the strange quiet of my new life, I tried to make sense of the inheritance he left, a staggering $24 million. When the lawyers handed me the final documents, their voices blurred into a distant hum. All I could think about was how hard he'd worked, how tirelessly he'd built everything he had, and how cruelly short his time had been to enjoy any of it. For a while, the money meant nothing to me. It was just another reminder that he was gone. Then, weeks after the funeral, a black sedan pulled into my driveway on an afternoon, so still it felt suspended between breaths. The woman who stepped out moved with the careful grace of someone who'd rehearsed her arrival. She wore a dark coat, her hair tied back neatly, her expression unreadable. I recognized her instantly, though I hadn't seen her in 15 years. Lena, my son's former love. The one who broke him. The one whose absence left a wound he carried quietly for years. I stood on my porch, unsure what to feel. Resentment, confusion, or the instinctive chill that comes when the past walks toward you with purpose. She stopped at the foot of the steps, met my eyes, and said my name as though it belonged to a memory she'd never quite let go of. "Elaine," she whispered. "I need to talk to you." I felt something shift, like the soft click of a lock just before a door swings open to a room you never meant to revisit. And in that moment, I knew my quiet grief was about to become much more complicated. Lena followed me into the living room with a hesitant grace, as if each step required permission. I gestured toward the couch, and she sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. In the soft afternoon light, she looked older, yes, but not fragile. Instead, she carried an unsettling calm, the kind that hinted at rehearsed explanations and carefully chosen words. "I didn't expect to ever come back here," she began, her voice low but steady. "But when I heard about Michael, I couldn't just stay away." I studied her face. Time had smoothed the sharp edges of her youth, but a familiar tension lingered around her eyes. The same tension I remembered from years ago, when she walked out of my son's life without a backward glance. I hadn't forgiven her for the pain she caused him. I doubted I ever would. "You should have stayed away," I said quietly. "There's nothing here for you." A small, tight smile flickered across her lips, vanishing just as quickly. "I know how it looks, and I'm not here to reopen old wounds. But there's something I need to talk to you about. Something important." My pulse tightened. "If this is about Michael, say it plainly." She inhaled slowly, as though preparing herself for some unseen impact. "It's about the inheritance." The words dropped between us like a stone. I felt a familiar heat rise in the back of my throat. Anger mingled with disbelief. "You have no place discussing that," I said. "Not after everything." Her gaze didn't waver. "Please listen. I'm not trying to take advantage of his death. But I need you to understand that my history with him isn't as simple as you think." My jaw tightened. "You left him, Lena. You broke his heart. Those are the facts." She flinched just barely, but it was enough to disrupt her composure. "I did," she admitted. "And I regret how I handled things. But before I left, Michael and I shared more than you know." I crossed my arms, refusing to be drawn in by ambiguity. "If you're here to claim some imagined stake in his money, you're wasting your time." "I'm not imagining anything." Her fingers trembled as she reached into her coat. "I came because I'm desperate. And because he told me years ago that if life ever pushed me to the edge, I could turn to you." The sentence slammed into me with cold precision. "Michael said that?" She placed a thin, sealed envelope on the coffee table. Its edges were worn, as if handled too often. My son's handwriting stared back at me, unmistakable and intimate. For you, she whispered. He wrote it 10 years ago. He gave it to me with instructions I never thought I'd follow. But here I am. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. A letter from Michael. A letter he never mentioned. A letter she had guarded for a decade. The room seemed to contract, pulling us both into the gravity of this unexpected revelation. And as my fingers hovered above the envelope, I felt the first tremor of something unmistakable. The sense that the truth I thought I knew about my son was about to change forever. My hands hovered above the envelope, but I didn't open it, not yet. Something in me needed a breath, a pause, a moment to steady the sudden trembling in my chest. Michael had never been secretive with me. The idea that he'd written a letter, entrusted it to a woman who once shattered him, left a thin crack running through everything I thought I understood about our relationship. Why didn't he give this to me himself? I asked, keeping my voice even. Lena clasped her fingers together, as though holding herself in place. Because he didn't want to burden you. At least, that's what he told me. The answer unsettled me more than I expected. Burden me with what? Her gaze dropped to the rug, as if the truth was woven somewhere between its threads. You'll understand once you read it. The response irritated me with its vagueness, yet I sensed she wasn't being evasive. She was afraid. Of the truth, of my reaction, of something she carried with her like an invisible weight. I finally lifted the envelope. The paper was soft around the edges, worn by time and touch. Michael's handwriting, deliberate, looping, unmistakably his, stirred a familiar ache. I slid a finger beneath the flap, but stopped just before opening it. Before I read this, I said, looking at her directly, I need you to explain why you think any part of my son's inheritance involves you. She exhaled shakily, a confession gathering behind her ribs. Because he asked me to come to you if everything fell apart. And everything has, Elaine. My life is unraveling. Emotion flickered across her face, fear, exhaustion, something bordering on desperation. But I didn't soften. Not yet. You assume, I said quietly, that telling me your life is difficult will make me believe you deserve something from mine. I'm not asking for sympathy, she said quickly. I'm asking for understanding. Michael and I, our story didn't end the way you think it did. Her voice thinned at the edges, but she pushed on. I didn't leave him because I stopped loving him. That sentence landed with a strange heaviness. I felt my heart tighten. Then why did you? She hesitated, as if stepping toward a memory she'd spent years trying to avoid. Because he pushed me away. He made me believe I wasn't part of his future. Her eyes glistened, not with theatrics but with something raw. I didn't know the real reason until later, far too late. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The envelope between us had already become the center of gravity, pulling every truth into its orbit. Lena wiped a tear from her cheek, breath unsteady. Whatever is in that letter, it will explain everything. Us. Him. The choices we both made. The room felt unbearably still. I opened the envelope. The first line of Michael's handwriting struck me like a whispered breath from the past, gentle, familiar, and unbearably painful. And as my eyes traced the words he had written a decade earlier, I realized this letter wouldn't just reveal a secret. It was about to rewrite the story I thought I knew. Michael's handwriting sprawled gently across the page, steady but full of a quiet urgency that made my breath hitch. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I kept a part of my life hidden from you. The sentence alone felt like a betrayal, small, unintentional, but piercing. My son had trusted me with everything, or so I believed. Yet here was proof that even the boy who once clung to my hand in grocery stores had learned, somewhere along the way, to keep certain doors closed. I didn't want you worrying about things you couldn't fix. You've spent enough of your life carrying my pain. My fingers tightened around the paper. The living room blurred at the edges, and the weight of the words pressed into my chest, heavy and strangely tender. Lena watched me with a still, wounded patience. She didn't interrupt. She didn't move. She simply waited, like someone bracing for a verdict. I continued reading. I pushed Lena away, because I learned something that changed everything. Something I couldn't bring myself to tell her. Not when it meant reshaping her entire future. I looked up sharply. What future? I asked, though the letter couldn't hear me. Lena's eyes softened. Keep reading. I did. She deserved a life I felt I couldn't give her. A life free of uncertainty. Free of fear. My pulse quickened. Fear? Of what? The next paragraph answered me. Mom, my heart condition didn't come out of nowhere. I was diagnosed years before I told anyone. I thought I had more time. I wanted to believe I did. But the truth is, I didn't know how much of myself I could promise to Lena when my future felt like borrowed moments. The room felt suddenly colder. I swallowed hard every memory of Michael, the exhaustion he brushed off, the faint paleness I chalked up to stress, sharpening with painful clarity. I loved her more than I knew how to say. Enough to let her believe I didn't want the life she imagined. I thought pushing her away was protecting her. My heart ached at the cruel tenderness of it. Across from me, Lena closed her eyes, her breath trembling. "He never told me," she whispered. "I only found out after he was gone." I returned to the final lines. "If she ever comes to you, Mom, it won't be to take anything. She'll come because she's fighting battles I once promised I'd help her through. And I couldn't keep that promise. I need you to do what I can't anymore." The words dissolved into the soft scratch of his signature. My son's last request. A request he didn't live long enough to voice. I folded the letter with shaking hands, the weight of it settling into my bones. Lena looked at me, her expression vulnerable in a way I had never seen. "I'm not here for the money, Elaine. I'm here because I have nowhere else left to turn." The truth sat between us, raw, complicated, undeniable. And just as I opened my mouth to respond, she whispered the final blow. "There's something else you need to know, something Michael never had the courage to write." For a moment, I could only hear the slow, rhythmic ticking of the clock on the mantel, each second carving deeper into the silence stretching between us. Lena looked as though she was holding her breath, waiting for something inside me to fracture or to soften. I wasn't sure which would happen first. "What else did he hide?" I asked quietly, though the steadiness of my voice surprised even me. She hesitated, her fingers tracing the seam of her coat as if gathering courage from the fabric. "Michael and we had a child. A daughter." The room tilted just slightly, as though the floor had shifted beneath my feet. I gripped the armrest to steady myself. "A child," I repeated, the word unfamiliar and sharp on my tongue. "Yes." Her voice cracked. "She was born a year after I left. I didn't tell him. I was angry, scared, confused. And when I finally decided to reach out, I learned about his condition. By then, I felt it would break him to know he had a little girl he might never watch grow." Grief unfurled inside me in a strange, unexpected shape. One part sorrow, one part awe. "I had a granddaughter," I whispered. "All this time?" Lena nodded, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. "She's 14 now. Bright, stubborn kind. Everything he was. She deserves stability. She deserves connection. And I'm failing her." Her confession was not the desperate plea of someone seeking financial gain. It was the fragile admission of a woman who had carried too many secrets alone. "What brought you here today?" I asked. "My daughter is sick," she said softly. "Not severely, not yet. But the doctors want tests, expensive ones. The insurance barely covers anything. I've drained my savings. I'm working 2 jobs. And a few weeks ago, she asked about her father, the man she's never met." Lena's voice trembled. I couldn't lie anymore. I told her his name. I showed her a picture. "And she asked me if you were alive." My throat tightened painfully. "So I came," she continued. "Not to take your son's money, but to ask if you'd like to know her. If you'd want her to know you." The air felt different then, lighter, yet painfully fragile, like a door opening to a room I didn't know I needed. Michael's letter sat in my lap, warm from my hands. His final request echoed through me, threading through every doubt and every ache. He wanted me to help her. He wanted me to choose compassion over the bitterness he once carried. I exhaled long and slow, letting my resistance fall away piece by piece. "Lena," I said gently, "I don't know what the future looks like. But I know this, my granddaughter deserves to be part of this family. And you deserve support, not shame." Her breath broke into a soft, disbelieving sob. For the first time since my son's death, I felt something other than grief stirring inside me. Something like purpose. Something like healing. And as Lena whispered a trembling "thank you," I knew Michael's story wasn't ending. It was shifting into a new beginning, one I had never expected to write.